Hello everyone, how y'all doing? So today I'm gonna share a bit of a hot take because for the past couple of days we've been seeing a lot of leaks related to GTA 6, but for the most part a lot of the leaks that we saw were more so gameplay related. It was just, Jason doing a bunch of things like driving or playing basketball or robbing someone's car or going to the strip club, like nothing related to the actual story. But very recently, CyberLeak actually posted a poll where people are actually voting as far as whether or not he should post the prologue for Lucia, which is ironic because one of the things that people observed throughout the past couple of days is that a lot of the clips that have been posted seems to mostly show Jason. There were no real gameplay footage showing Lucia. Like if you saw on Twitter, like those were fake. The actual official leaks that were posted by CyberLeak, none of them actually contain Lucia. And this is actually making a lot of people wonder if the build that this guy has might not actually be complete if we were to assume that Lucia isn't playable, because that's kind of what people are assuming. And so for him to make a poll essentially asking people, hey, do you want me to post the entire prologue of Lucia, it kind of indirectly confirms that he can use Lucia. He just hasn't been using it throughout the past couple of days, which is very interesting. But regardless, this is where I'm seeing a lot more people showing a lot of opposition towards this, because this is actually, like, for example, this tweet right here where Colin Moriarty is saying, while I couldn't care less about how Grand Theft Auto 6 leaks affect Take-Two, I do care how they affect the tens of millions of people excitedly waiting for the game for years. See, this is the thing that I actually wanted to focus on, because I'm going to share to you a hot take. I think CyberLeak should post spoilers. I truly do believe that. I am saying this while also acknowledging the fact that compared to the previous leaks, I do think that this one would impact the player a bit more, comparatively speaking, but I still think it needs to happen. And let me explain you why. GTA 6 is a game that, in my opinion, has made a lot of really slimy decisions with the way Take-Two has, been aggressively litigious when it comes to certain things. Like, for example, it was only maybe a year or two ago when they bought 5M, and ever since they bought 5M, they've essentially just been sending DMCA notices to other role-playing mods, which I find it to be really fucking scummy. There was also the fact that, they decided not to release a physical copy. They then, decided to reveal the showcase by locking away on a fucking Netflix subscription. There's also the fact that they've been locking away entire stores behind the $100 edition of the game, even though the base game is already pretty expensive by being $80. They've just been making a lot of decisions that I find to be very scummy, and they've been doing that for the past couple of years, even before the GTA 6 fiasco started happening. And honestly, even just the mere fact that they haven't really been doing a ton when it comes to the promotional material. And here's the thing, I understand that Rockstar is known for not showing a lot, not showing a lot of trailers. But the thing is, it's one thing if they're not showing, promotional material. Meanwhile, we're all just kind of waiting until the game actually comes out. But they've already made pre-orders available. They're already, making their games available for pre-order. By the way, digital pre-order, so not even physical pre-order. But it would be one thing if it was that. But it's a digital pre-order, so it doesn't actually matter if you pre-order the game today or even 2 weeks before the game comes out. It makes absolutely no difference. And yet they're expecting you to pre-order the game. Meanwhile, we haven't actually seen a lot of gameplay footage. I mean, now we have, but it wasn't through them. It was through CyberLeak. And so they've been doing a lot of that stuff. And I genuinely believe that a lot of that is born out of the fact that Rockstar genuinely believes that they can get away with so many things, because the truth is they have a franchise that is just able to naturally build up a lot of hype. And that is just a reality. The Grand Theft Auto franchise, I've said this for a while, this isn't a franchise that is only enjoyed by the gamers. A lot of people, including people that maybe even just buy one game a year, maybe the only games they buy are Call of Duty and FIFA. Maybe even some people that don't even buy games. There have been so many people making references to GTA 6, people that I know for a fact just don't have time to play video games at all. It's one of those games where it's so many people, even people that are outside of the gaming community, are massively excited, because the Grand Theft Auto franchise is one that has been in many people's lives for years, since their childhoods. And so this is a pretty big release. But I also think that because of the fact that GTA 5 was released 13 years ago, this game has built up such an aggressive anticipation for its release that I feel like Rockstar is essentially making bank just purely based on anticipation. And the worst part is that they're also using that as an excuse to make a lot of decisions that, I think shouldn't be acceptable. Like, for example, the physical release thing, using the fact that, hey, we have to protect our games against leaks and spoilers as justification for just not releasing a physical copy, which I find to be unacceptable. I don't think that's a good reason to deprive people of actually owning the game. At least give us an option. Like, it's one thing if you're not printing a lot of units, but not even giving us an option at all. I think that it's unacceptable. I think that that is an unacceptable thing to do. And that's why I think that giving away spoilers, I feel like undermines some of that hype that I think Rockstar just inherently has. Because think about it. If people know what's going to happen, like, so much of the anticipation that so many people have is just going to wither away. And when a game's release is no longer defined by the hype, people can actually make much more objective decisions, or at least I hope people can make objective decisions. Because I feel like right now that is sort of like what's influencing a lot of people's minds. Like, so many people right now are just like, they're just, excited by the idea that, hey, November 17, I think that's the day, November 17, 2026. Finally, it's the day that GTA 6 comes out. Let's see what it is. And I think that sort of like feeling of FOMO is negatively affecting many people's judgment. And I think that spoilers is one of those things where it's able to undermine a lot of that. And I also think that it kind of creates this sort of like checkmate moment for Rockstar, because it's a very similar situation, for example, when it comes to DRM, where companies, they will justify using DRM by simply stating that it's protecting themselves against piracy. But it's like, okay, but like if your DRM gets cracked like 5 days after your game gets released, then what other justification do you have to keep that? Because at the moment, you're kind of just hurting the consumers, because DRM has a known track record for affecting, like, sometimes it'll affect the performance, other times it'll affect the load times. In my experience, it affects how many actually not even PCs, how many Proton runners I can actually change before the game locks me out. Like, how many times I can troubleshoot the game by opening and closing before the game locks me out for like 24 or 48 hours. Those are the things that, DRM does to impact my experience. And, if the game gets cracked 5 days later, it's like, what other justification do you have for keeping this? Because at this point, you're just keeping it to hurt my experience. And I think that GTA 6 needs that moment. I think it needs a moment where the story gets spoiled, and after it gets spoiled, Rockstar has to now justify why are they still not releasing physical media? Because if the reason is spoilers, what spoilers? We already know what happens. So what other justification do you have? And if the answer is nothing, then at that point, you're just hurting the consumers just for the sake of it. This is what I mean when I say Rockstar needs to be humbled. The other thing about all of this is I also think that this is a moment where I think the consumer also needs to be humbled. Because I've always held the belief that a lot of gamers don't have very strong convictions. Like, gamers, they will whine, they will complain, they will, scream anti-consumer, stuff like that. But when it comes to voting with their wallets, when it comes to, succumbing to their feeling of, FOMO, they just fumble. They fumble really hard. And this to me is a good example of this. It's like, I don't think there are a lot of people that are going to deny the fact that Rockstar has been making a lot of slimy decisions. But how many of those people are actually going to, take a stand and actually not buy GTA 6? Very few. That's just the reality. Very few are actually going to do that. It's basically like the whole meme of Mutahar stating, don't buy the Switch 2. Meanwhile, he's doing the midnight release purchase. Like, that's just the type of mentality that a lot of gamers have. It's that feeling of FOMO, feeling of missing out. And I think that GTA 6, regardless if spoilers get posted or not, people are still going to have that feeling. But I think the main difference is that the consumers, they can have that moment where it's like, hey, you can, like, because right now they're essentially freaking the hell out. They're freaking the fuck out over the idea of getting spoiled. But once the game actually does get spoiled, then at that point, they can no longer run away from their problems. They can no longer use anticipation for the game as an excuse to not address a lot of the things that's been currently happening. And I don't actually think that I don't think that this will be the wake-up call for everyone, but I think it might be the wake-up call for a lot of people. Because if they no longer have the hype of knowing what happens in the story, then at that point they can actually start discussing what the game is actually offering. And granted, I think GTA 6 is offering a lot of good things. And again, I know it sucks to be spoiled. None of us have to be spoiled, but I think it needs to happen because again, GTA 6 is a game that has way more hype than it should have at this moment, and it's clouding a lot of people's judgments. It's making Rockstar believe that they're untouchable. And I think that something needs to happen to break the cycle. And if you don't think that this needs to happen, I'm gonna be honest, I think you're part of the problem. And to be completely frank with you, I also just don't like this idea that when games get spoiled, then as consumers, we're victims. Like, I'm sorry, but I really don't like this victim mentality. Like, here's the thing. If you want to argue that the developers are victims, I can at least somewhat understand. I don't necessarily agree with that take either because I'm gonna be honest with you, like developers at their core, they're being paid by the hour. Like it's not like the game getting leaks is somehow like discounting their fucking salary or something like that. They're getting paid the exact same amount, regardless if this game gets leaked or not. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm sure this entire event is an inconvenience to them. I'm sure they now have to go through several audits, several, security, e-learnings and stuff like that, which I'm sure is extremely annoying. I'm sure they're now going through several meetings where they're now discussing a lot of the security practices, and I'm sure a lot of that is creating many inconveniences. But if I'm being completely honest with you, if we're really going to talk about the developers, what I think is a much more pressing matter is the crunch culture, the fact that a lot of developers and voice actors don't have a lot of strong protections against AI, the fact that Rockstar has a habit of just kind of doing a lot of like temporary, I mean, it's not just Rockstar to be fair, it's like it's pretty much the entire industry doing things like temporary contracts, outsourcing their work to like sometimes third world countries just to save up on cash. It's like, to me, that's the stuff that we should really discuss if we're really going to talk about the developers. Whether or not the game gets leaked, like realistically, this is mostly affecting Rockstar in Take-Two suits. It's not really affecting the developers as much. Not saying it doesn't have any impact. I'm not saying the developers are happy seeing their works getting leaked, but I'm just saying, like, saying the whole, oh, think of the developers, to me always felt like a red herring. But even then, I can still understand. But the consumers, bro, fuck off. You paid $100 to pre-order this fucking game, and you're still getting the game. You are not getting scammed. You're still going to get the game. You're just upset because you're gonna get spoiled, and you don't want to get spoiled. But that's not the same thing as being a victim, all right? Being a victim, in my opinion, is buying a game and not owning it. Like, for example, when you buy something digitally on the PlayStation Store with harsh refunds policies, where even if you install the game, you're no longer entitled to a refund. To me, that's being a victim. Or how about the fact that if you just launch the fucking game, you're no longer eligible for a refund? The fact that you can't resell the game. The fact that PlayStation sometimes will ban people for reselling. Well, I don't know if they ban. I'm not entirely sure how often that happens with PlayStation. I know Steam bans people for selling accounts, but stuff like that. Or even just the mere fact that this game is not even getting a day one release on Steam. Even though I would argue that Steam is much more friendly when it comes to digital purchases. How about the fact that you're not getting a physical media, which is realistically the only way you can actually own a game on consoles? To me, that is what being a victim actually means. And so, I'm sorry, but like, I care a little bit more about owning games than I do about getting spoiled, okay? I've been spoiled for Final Fantasy VII like so many times throughout the years. I don't give a shit. I still have Final Fantasy VII Remake and the other one, is it Rebirth? I think it's Rebirth, the second one. I have those two games. I can tell you right now, I already know what happens in these two games. Final Fantasy VII is a franchise that has existed since the 90s, okay? I know what happens. People have talked about this. People have spoiled me multiple times. But I like owning games. I like playing games. I can still enjoy a game even if I get spoiled. I can still enjoy a game even if I know what happens, because I still think that video games can offer value beyond just what story I did or didn't watch. When I bought the fucking Storm games, you think I didn't know what happened to the... I've read Naruto. Of course I know what fucking happened. But I still enjoy the game. So no, fuck this whole... Oh, think of the consumers. Like now it's no longer think of the developers. Think of the consumers. You're hurting consumers. Dude, look, you're a grown adult. You probably have a job. You probably have a family. If you really want to avoid spoilers, touch grass. Don't focus on the internet. Don't focus on the leaks. And frankly speaking, if you care more about not getting spoiled than some of the serious, anti-consumer practices that a lot of these companies have been doing recently, then I really start to question your morality at that point. Because truth be told, I don't support hackers. I don't support hacking. I don't endorse that stuff. But like, I genuinely think that like there's certain companies, they deserve to have their pockets hurt because they're in a position where they can no longer continue with the power that they have right now because it's impacting people beyond just, releasing a bad product is one thing. If you release a bad product, whatever. But in the case of Rockstar, it's no longer just a case of releasing a bad product. They're, in my opinion, exploiting their consumers. I mean, we haven't even really talked about GTA Online 2, which I can't even imagine what that thing is going to offer because even GTA Online was already known for so many predatory stuff. I can't even imagine what GTA Online 2 is going to do. We haven't even gotten to that. And we all know what's going to, like, at the end of the day, we always need to remember that Rockstar is owned by Take-Two. You know what Take-Two does? They release fucking NBA yearly games. You know, those same games that have like fucking slot machines, like literal slot machines for games that are probably Peggy 3. You know what I mean? I can't even imagine what's going to happen there. And yes, I think these companies deserve to have their ego hurt. And if it ends up impacting the consumers in some way or another, then so fucking be it. Maybe it's time for the consumers to also wake the fuck up and actually start to acknowledging some of the serious stuff that's been happening in the industry. But anyway, that's just my perspective. I honestly think that GTA 6 needs to be spoiled, and that's about it.